My in-person guest on Project Sinatra is my longtime friend, and I might even say mentor, Mr. David Cavanaugh, Vice President, A&R, for us that means producer, at Capitol Records. David, welcome.
Paul, it's so nice to be here with you today.
It's a great pleasure for me to have you with us on this project because we are presenting primarily, almost exclusively, people with whom Sinatra has come in close contact over a period of some time. Now, how long did you produce albums for Sinatra following Voyal Gilmore?
Well, from the time of Gilmore till the end of his time at Capitol, everything after Gilmore, years escape me. It was, I spent quite a few years with the association with Frank, which was beautiful.
I seem to have the feeling myself, Dave, that under your aegis, if I may use that term, he really became a swinging singer as well as a fine ballad singer. How did that come about?
Well, I think with Frank that he matured during the period that I was with him. Not that there's no inference there that he was immature before that, but I mean his singing and his approach to songs, approach to albums and so on, that was very mature, and his thinking was very good. I think I believe it's funny you talk about the swinging things, because we did make, Come Dance With Me and Come Swing With Me and albums like that.
David Cavanaugh, please continue.
I leaned towards the ballads with him. I loved the ballads.
Yes.
I mean, I believe I had done a single record session before that, but I believe the first album I made with him was Only the Lonely.
Mm.
And I guess that would probably be my all-time favorite. I mean, of all the albums. It was some, it was actually amazing the way that with Only the Lonely, as I recall, when we did the first session, Frank was not in particularly good voice, and you didn't have to tell Frank that. He knew that.
Yes.
And he said, let's call it off, and I'm going to Palm Springs, and I'm going into basic training. And that's what he used to call it. And he says, I'll call you in a few days when it's all together. So a few days later he called, and he says, get the band, and he says, get the charts, and let's go such and such a night. And because he came in, most people don't know this. I mean, in the days of today's recording, where groups go in and take 3 weeks to get one selection,
yes,
we did 7 selections in that first night. I mean, with no stress.
This is the amazing part of Sinatra to me, and you're just confirming it now. He didn't like to work with headphones. He liked to work in front of the band, with the band, get the take all the way through, not lift out an and from here or there.
Well, what he would do, he would hear what the arranger had put down. He would listen.
Mm-hmm.
He'd wander around the studio, and Dean Martin used to kid him and say, you're wandering around because you don't know the song. He knew the song, yes. But he had that great flexibility that he would adjust to what the chart was, and where he would breathe, and where he would sing, and where the accompanying orchestra had something important to say. He'd duck out of the way. He'd be out of the way. He didn't have to worry about that. He had great flexibility in doing those things. So, as I recall, that was a Nelson Riddle album. Nelson Riddle did the charts. Unfortunately, the night that we did the first 2 sessions, Nelson was committed to a TV show or something, and Felix Slatkin conducted the orchestra. And Frank had great respect for Felix.
What do you mean by going into training? I've heard this rumor. If he doesn't feel he's quite right, he does train. In what way does he train, as far as you know?
Well, I think that he probably get proper rest,
mm-hmm.
and maybe ease off on smoking,
yes,
and proper diet, and just taking care of himself, I mean, in other words, lead a more regimented life for a few days.
Do you have an outstanding thought as regards Sinatra the man, Dave, and you're associated with him, as to the reasons for his continued success? What would be that prime characteristic?
Animal magnetism. I mean, in other words, that but it's an animal magnetism that he could be liked by men as well as women. You know, I mean,
Yes.
naturally he had all sorts of lady fans and girl fans and so on like that. But yet there were an awful lot of guys that liked his singing. It was just a magnetism. It's this chemical thing.
Were there clashes between you on occasion during the production of a record?
Sure.
Good ones?
No, not really harsh things. I mean, that I had originally not been too overwhelmed with the idea of recording Sinatra. I had a few other things going for me at the point, and I didn't want to get involved in something that I thought was Gilmore's or something like that, but Mr. Wallach's had asked me at least to go talk to him. And I went to Las Vegas, and we sat down and talked, and we made up some ground rules. And you see, as a producer for Sinatra, to be real selfish about it, you had nothing really to gain and everything to lose, because everybody expected him to have a hit every time out of the box. So if everything went right, it was Frank's thing, and if something went wrong, it was the lousy producer.
I'm going to play something from one of the fine productions which you supervised of Sinatra, and then we will return with our in-person guest, David Cavanaugh. Our guest is Dave Cavanaugh of Capitol Records, who throughout many years was the producer for numerous Sinatra albums. In these recording sessions and outside recording sessions with Sinatra, you mentioned the animal magnetism. What is the quality within him which not only endears him to musicians and the people with whom he worked, but the quality which established his success?
Well, he's a very unique human being. I mean, in other words, you know, that there's a lot of bad things said about Frank. I mean, and mostly without really too much excuse for that, you know. But if Frank respects you, if he respects you, then you have to respect him. And he takes charge. I don't know. I think the best thing is, the best example I can tell you, Paul, is that I went over the Sands one time in Las Vegas, and I saw him perform. It was a dinner show, which he didn't care much about doing dinner shows at that point in his career. And he came out, and like the first 10 or 15 minutes, you know, there was none of the animal magnetism going on. There was nothing, just really much happening. But all of a sudden, it just overwhelmed you. I mean, in other words, it's just a chemical reaction or something like that in the room. And he was into it, and the room was into it, and he could do no wrong, and so on. And he wasn't feeling particularly good that evening, and so on like that. But he just picked it up, and he sang, and his charm came across, and his desire. I mean, in other words, that is the whole thing, to me, is desire. I've worked with many singers, and when Frank had the desire, I mean, there was nothing any better.
The final question for you, David Cavanaugh, right off the top of your head, whether or not it was a session you produced, or a session produced by someone else, or from some other company, is there an all-time favorite song which hits your mind right now when I say the name Sinatra?
As I mentioned before, Only the Lonely.
In a radio broadcast, syndicated columnist Jim Bishop spoke of Sinatra as the avid reader and mentioned that only a lonely man has the time to read so extensively. Loner, maybe. Lonely, never. Our in-person guest has been David Cavanaugh. It is a great pleasure to have had you appear on Project Sinatra, Dave. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's just really a pleasure being here talking about a great man.